Greetings, dear friends. Today in Allat TV studio, we welcome the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, several very important and very interesting events have happened recently. On the platform of Allat International Public Movement, on May 11th, 2019, the conference Society the Last Chance was held. What's interesting is that it was initiated by people themselves, and thousands of people managed to get together, to unite in one online call in order to discuss the most acute and the most important issues of modern humanity. What has led to the fact that we, as a society, are now on the verge of collapse, that we are in a dead-end situation? The following topics were discussed. That precisely the consumer-based format of the civilization development has led us to this. And what's most interesting is that with all this, mass media are propagating fear and some sort of hopelessness, saying that the doomsday clock points at 2 minutes to midnight. And all these ideas and all these very important and sensitive topics that were raised by people, they were, well, one might say, they found a response among people all over the world. And as a result of the conference of May 11th, on June 22nd, another international conference took place, where several speakers took the floor, including a presidential candidate of the United States of America. And he voiced those proposals, those ideas which people talked about on May 11th, and made a number of proposals. I would just briefly read them out. It's a proposal to limit the individual capital. It's a proposal that society, at least the economy, needs to be changed fundamentally, to be put on new rails, that we need a united, planned economy of a creative and constructive society, that in society there should be a single, militarized structure, that science must stand on the creative and constructive rails, and in connection with this…
Simply moving away from the consumer-based format to the creative and constructive one.
Absolutely right. But why I'm raising these topics now and talking about these conferences is because in connection with these events, very many people have addressed us. There have been a lot of letters and a lot of questions about what you, Igor Mikhailovich, think regarding this. Therefore, today…
Regarding the conferences or the issues that were raised there?
Regarding the proposals that people voiced on how we can cross over to the creative and constructive format of society, how we can live in peace, how we can survive under the conditions of the coming cataclysms, and how we can live in a world without wars.
Well, it's a good question. How can we cross over? It's easy to cross the road, but to change the foundation that has been formed for 6,000 years. On the one hand, consciousness will tell that it is extremely difficult, but on the other hand, it's even easier than crossing the road. Everything depends on people. What they decide, so it will be. It's definitely not up to you and me to decide this. Well, but to express my opinion, as a citizen, why not?
Well, I would like to start probably with the first such question, which aroused particular interest and which caused debates, sometimes healthy debates, sometimes unhealthy ones. It's a question regarding the limitation of capital. There were a lot of comments and a lot of talks on this topic, whether it has any future or not.
And the most curious thing is that precisely those who will rise against the limitation of capital, who have absolutely nothing to limit, and will have nothing in the foreseeable future either. And so they will stand much more against the introduction of such a measure.
By the way, yes, it turns out that the majority of people who doubt or ponder
get indignant
over this issue are people who at the moment have…
These are the people who not only at the moment, but both in the short-term and the long-term perspective will have nothing.
Why?
Consciousness, to put it in a civilized manner, exploits them this way. And there is one small interesting point here. Why? Because people, they hope to become rich one day. And they see a picture in their heads that they are already oligarchs, billionaires. Well, how come? And here is some community. They gathered, yes, from around the world, yes, a lot of people. Well, how can they raise a hand against the holy, so to say? How can they limit the individual capital, right? Well, this is wrong. This is freedom, after all. You earn as much as you can and spend wherever you want. Well, because in their heads they are already billionaires, and already buy whatever they can and spend wherever possible. Yet, why have I said that they will never become rich, and they are at no risk of capital limitation? It's exactly because, in their heads, they are already billionaires.
So they are already thinking that at this moment, that is, consciousness is drawing them a picture that I possess this.
They invest attention in their desire, which will never come true, because in their heads they're already billionaires.
Meaning consciousness has drawn a picture of some future reality for them.
An illusion of exploitation. Yes, same as always.
And they are simply afraid of losing this dream of theirs, the one which...
No, not the dream. They aren't afraid. They crave being wealthy, crave being oligarchs, simply because they don't know that life. They're looking upward from below at people who, can do much, have tremendous opportunities, and they drive around with guards. This way they draw attention to themselves and arouse what in other people?
Envy.
Envy, absolutely right. Not even understanding that they are given precisely that which they possess, in order to arouse envy in others. But if one of these envious ones would have talked to and conversed with these oligarchs regarding what their life is like, then I think they wouldn't envy them, because their life turns into a nightmare. Only their wrapper is pretty. Yes, the cage is golden, but it's very small and strangers carry it around.
However, consciousness draws a picture that funds and some kind of financial wealth.
Give freedom.
Yes.
After all, why does a person strive to become richer and gain more and more power? In order to gain freedom. Not that kind of freedom which consciousness talks about. A person feels and strives for spiritual freedom. In the first place, from dictatorship of consciousness, from dictatorship of the beast in his head. And it's precisely this beast, our animal nature, that turns everything upside down. So it appears that a person is looking for freedom in the external, and it seems to him that those tools which someone supposedly possesses give some degree of freedom, some power. These are all illusions. No matter what power a person has in this world, everything is temporary. We won't talk about this. I wanted to make a joke regarding who has a certain power here over a small group of people for a long time.
Igor Mikhailovich, but in general, this issue of the limitation of capital...
Let's figure this out.
...of society.
What forms the consumer-based format of society, which we have had for almost 6,000 years? What lies at its foundation?
Avarice, most probably.
Greed, pridefulness,
self-interest, avarice.
And many other things, right. However, if we approach this from the perspective of society, what is the reason? Unlimited capital accumulation, meaning a person can grow rich, there is no limit. Some have gotten so rich that they even think that they rule the world, you see? They provoke all kinds of disturbances around, just as an entertainment. Not because they don't have enough money, even though there is never too much money for anybody. Meaning, no matter how much you give to a person, he'll never have enough. And here's a simple question. How much does a person need for a normal, happy life?
Here people also have questions, opinions vary. Many probably haven't even thought about how much they need.
How much money does a person need in order to attain a happy life? None. Money cannot buy happiness. And this is true. It's possible to buy an illusion, but any illusion is temporary. For instance, a person has desired to become, let's say, a famous singer, right? After all, we know a lot of cases when fairly big funds are invested. Sound producers make singers out of them. Movie producers hype them up and so forth. Yes, they become famous, but there is no happiness. We know many individuals in whom funds are invested, and they become famous politicians. But there is no happiness. Everything is transient. Money cannot buy happiness. That's the truth of life.
Regarding the consumer-based format, in essence, it's like a format of disturbances, right? I have just recalled information and such official statistics that over the last 5,600 years, 14,500 wars have taken place in the world, in which 4 billion people have died. This is basically that slave-owning format of society which we live in. And what's most interesting is that seemingly the 20th century, which gave some hope for preconditions of a peaceful beginning of the century, yet we see
The 20th? Well, the 20th century gave preconditions. World War I, then, mid-century, World War II. Millions of lives were taken, and to this day, people are being killed and die. Well, there is a simple question: what do they die for? For someone's illusion, for someone's insatiability. What is the reason for all wars? Avarice, greed, meaning, unlimited capital accumulation. Let's imagine if, for example, well, let's just fantasize. Our friends will let us fantasize a little, right? Let's imagine that people have really desired to change something in their lives. Let's say they've tired of walking the wrong path. All people of the planet have gathered and said, we want to live in a creative and constructive society, and one of the forms is an introduction of a limit of a person's capital, taking all his assets into account. And what does the introduction of a limit mean? After all, this is not just a limit for a person. This is for his family, meaning the wife, the husband, and the children who are still financially dependent are taken into account. If they become adults, start their own business, that already creates a new cell, that's already a different cell of society. Yes, parents can help, but the money that is transferred from one family to another remains an asset of the first family. Here, this is including the overall net value of personal property, real estate, and everything else. For instance, such a limitation has been introduced. What will happen? Everything depends, of course, on the amount, right? The amount that limits capital. What is brought forth from what I have heard today, exactly by these guys who dream of getting rich. Someone talks about $10 billion at our current exchange rate. Someone about $1 billion, someone about 100 million. Well, since my personal opinion was asked then, I think the maximum capital of an individual, taking into account all his assets, and for his entire family, let's say, if he is the main, so to say, source of income of the family, and if, let's suppose, it's him and his wife, then it still should be calculated
the aggregate amount.
Cumulatively, the family income is taken into account. Well, I think $10 million is more than enough. More than that simply doesn't make sense. Of course, many will argue some have watches which are more expensive than the number I named, but are they really more accurate? Some have houses that are more expensive, and is it really cozier in them? Some have, pardon me, let's not go far, yachts which cost a lot more than the number I named. Airplanes, which are 50 or even 100 times more expensive than the number I named. But what is the point of that? Has life actually become more beautiful and better, or what? Well, this way we arrive at the wrong valuations. Well, let's slightly touch on it for understanding, so that our friends would understand what this is about. These are not realistic surcharges. For example, there are artists, and we know that their paintings are extremely expensive. And billionaires love to buy them and brag about that. Well, the paintings by, let's say, that very Picasso, right? Everyone knows them, the name is famous and so on. Just because it is known, it's a brand. That's why it costs so much. How much does a canvas cost, and how much does paint cost? And the work of the man himself? Well, how can it cost millions? Here's a simple question. With an average salary, if we even calculate the average salary all across the world, this is not reasonable. Well, isn't it so? That is, a person has spent hours. Here is the product, yes, a painting. I know that many will say that I don't understand. Of course, guys, I don't understand. I don't understand how Malevich's black square can cost so many millions. Black paint, canvas, and nothing there. That will make humanity happier. That will give some kind of joy and hope to humanity. This I don't understand. But I perfectly understand when some kind of equipment is created which facilitates work, and it can cost money, right? Well, let's say it's just closer to me as a doctor, an MRI machine, bed, or something else. Something that actually costs money because it is complex and many people worked on it. But it How many times is a modern, even one of the best MRI devices, cheaper than Malevich's black square? Some will argue it's exclusive. It's the only copy. What will humanity lose, having lost this painting?
Wrong values in society, prioritization of these values.
Absolutely right.
That is not the value of human life, as it should be in a creative and constructive society.
Not only the value of human life, but of his spiritual component and not the animal component. And this is exactly what we are getting to, right? After all, what is more valued in the modern consumer-based format? The financial status of a person. And it doesn't matter what kind of a person he is, who predominates in him, what he lives by. The main thing is that he's rich.
What examples? Yes, in society.
Of course, a simple question. A person has money, he has a lot of it. It doesn't matter which way he got it. The main thing is that he's rich and he's an oligarch, as they say here, right? And that's all. He's already worthy, he's a hero, he's worthy of respect. But not what he has done for society. What example he actually serves? Well, true values indeed. Yet, for instance, when a limit of capital is introduced, this doesn't mean that a person has earned 10 million and no longer has the right to work. He certainly has. Why not? While excess profits are directed to the needs of society, what does this give? Here's a simple example.
Development.
These are huge capitals that do not end up
In the hands.
in the digital form somewhere in the banks, right? But it's distribution of funds. After all people actually produce, pardon me, they don't draw with black paint on canvas. They produce machines. On these machines, they create that which we use. They grow crops. They process these crops and cook the food we eat. And we people are engaged in this. Should this cost money? It should. Or, by definition, when people work at manufacturing sites for a person, people sell the goods that are produced. People calculate his profitability and only occasionally report to him how much richer he has become. Is this fair?
No.
Well, a simple question. Clearly, he is smart, he has managed to make money. No one deprives him of that. Well, simple and elementary. What else does this give when a capital limit is introduced? This gives security to a person, because foolish competition disappears, which is quite fierce in those circles, this competition. And it represents a threat for his life and the life of his family. Whereas in this case, a person can safely walk around the marketplace, shake everyone's hand, and not be 24 hours a day under protection of strangers who dream of taking his place.
That is, all sums beyond this capital limit
Sure,
are directed towards development, towards the needs of society.
sure. Meaning there is a correct redistribution of money, of funds that flow. What does this allow? This allows removing unnecessary foolish competition. This again allows all of humanity to become a lot richer, a whole lot richer. This allows creating free healthcare. The same for everyone. Well, this was also voiced.
Right, for people.
People precisely voiced this at the conference and so on. It's not just an idea, it's a necessity. Free high-quality healthcare of the same level throughout the world. Any person should be socially protected. Anyone. But the one who wants to be richer can go and work, earn extra money and live better. Yet the limit is 10 million. It's more than enough. But, again, not just free healthcare, there should be free education, and there should be reasonable prices. For example, how much do, let's say, housing fees, utility costs, and everything else amount to nowadays? And what if, God forbid, there is also a housing loan?
Yet, sometimes in some countries, taxes reach 80 or even 90% of the value of earnings, right?
Well, these are taxes, well, I mean bills and all that, right? That is to pay a loan. To pay for public utilities based on a person's average salary. That is, almost the greater part of it is gone anyway. Well, it would be right, and people voiced this point, and I absolutely agree with that. Well, I emphasize, all these expenses shouldn't exceed 10% of one's salary. This is easy to do. Economically, it all fits. Guys, there is nothing simpler than macroeconomics.
Well, regarding
Micro is a problem, while macro is simple.
Also regarding macroeconomics, the idea of creating such a unified, planned economy of a united creative and constructive society was voiced.
And that is right. That's absolutely right. There will be no overproduction, and there will be no shortages. Why? If somewhere, let's say, there is a lack of something, it immediately becomes more expensive. And again, those very price increases, those inflations and everything else, they're the scourge of our time. It's a tool of the consumer-based order which drives a person into a pit of debt. Well, let's say, just as slavery began 6,000 years ago, right? So to this day, it has only been getting more refined. And this is true, absolutely.
Absolutely. The same thing under various facades, right?
Of course. Only nowadays a person is much more deprived of rights, and he is absolutely dependent. Why? No matter how much money a person has earned, in 10 to 20 years, his capital will decrease significantly, even if they put it in banks to earn interest, but inflation is much higher and faster than his interest rate is. That is, a person becomes poorer, even without spending anything. This shouldn't happen a priori. If a soup mix, as they say, costs, for example, well, I'm speaking figuratively, so that people understand, a kilogram of meat, of a certain category, well, and a loaf of bread, the soup mix costs that much. There's a strictly fixed price. It should cost exactly the same all over the world. It should cost that much today, in 20, in 100, and in 200 years. After all, it's not difficult. Well, to put it simply, has gold become lighter or what? Or has oil become better and thicker? Why is inflation taking place? Because there is greed. Because these are trade boosters and the like, meaning it's beneficial for a state when its currency becomes cheaper. This intensifies the flow of funds. Well, the state sort of becomes richer, while people become poorer. Yet again, it's beneficial for a state. How can that be? What benefits a state doesn't benefit the citizens of this state. Then there is a question. What is a state? A state is who? A simple question.
Well, I'm not talking about what it should be ideally, but unfortunately, in our society, most likely a state means territories, most likely these are some facilities, subsoil resources like...
Wait, that is, it is not a living state.
Unfortunately.
Or an amorphous one. But in my understanding, a state means people who exist within a certain agreement, within a certain territory. They do business here, they live here, they feel good here, their ancestors lived here, or they moved here, it doesn't matter, they are citizens of this state. This is what a state is, and it's them who should benefit. After all, in my opinion, a proper state is when, year after year, it becomes easier and better for people to live, when it becomes simpler, when it becomes freer for them. Then this is right. While what do we observe? What tendency do we have? Well, at least over the last couple of 100 years. Does it happen this way? Well, let's take the last 20 or 30 years. People's life has been improving, right?
No.
Therefore, what is a state for us?
You know, I would...
A state for us, is it kings that rule? That is, the ruling elite? I'll put it simply. Today it is believed that a state is those who possess power. And who possess power in our case? Let's take the constitution of any country and read its people.
While in actual fact...
And all this, and the tools of manipulation of substitutions that have taken place during all this time, they have led to the fact that before, pardon me, people talked in a low voice in their kitchen about these problems. It would be great if there were such a community. It would be nice if we lived like this. And now they're already saying it. Excuse me, a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America declares to the whole world about transition of economy and the world order from the rails of consumer-based format to a creative and constructive format. Why? And it is openly said that if we don't do this, nothing good awaits humanity, right?
Every person understands and actually feels where
Absolutely
this
right.
consumer-based format leads to and how much deceit,
Absolutely
how
right.
much...
And here you've pointed out the key phrase. If previously the brainwashing technologies of those who considered themselves authority, substituting constitutions of their countries, they easily manipulated people's consciousness. Today, this boiling point, or point of compression, let's imagine such a spiral or a spring, kept being compressed and has reached the point when people started talking about this openly. And since people started talking about this, it means we're standing on the verge of what? Of the reverse movement of the spring. Meaning a direct counteraction is going on, a precedent has already taken place, and nothing can be done about the precedent. This has become publicly available, and it captivates the masses, meaning there is a wave that starts spreading little by little. And here, in my personal opinion, if this turns into a tsunami, then neither climatic changes, no nuclear wars are a threat to humanity. Because this very spring, when extending, and it is extending not from the spiritual position, but from the position of that extreme negativity which has always been cultivated in humanity, that which the consumer-based format has been supporting and developing. And it has been supporting and developing, extremely negative qualities of a person. That is his animal side, animal nature, and this very beast will break out. What will happen? Well, some will say, if some of the powerful ones might watch us, which I doubt, of course, they are busy. After all, they are managing people. They don't have time for us, for humanity. Well, they will say, what is this Masseur talking about? After all, we have armies, we have mercenaries and the rest. Well, and a lot of hidden tools which will restrain anyone.
By the way, this is also such an issue.
Yes, but the issue is simple, that the same army, those very mercenaries, those very secret specialists who are not spoken of out loud, they're people who likewise coming back home, in their kitchen, hear from their wives and their children what people have just voiced. And if he receives such an order, nobody knows in what direction he would turn his pitchfork that you've given him. Isn't that so? These are people, and it's already boiling up in everyone. If people started talking about this, well, there is such an expression. It means that it might happen, right? The only question is when it might happen. And how, that's also important.
What the scenario of that would be.
Yes, whether it will be a manageable process, civilized and polite, people will talk while sitting at the table, well, so to speak. Or it will be chaos, which is uncontrollable. Another revolution, but only on a world scale. Well, we have some world rulers who enjoy arranging revolutions and consider it to be the right thing in various countries. And imagine if it happens all around the world. Well, yes, they hope that it cannot happen. We control everything. No one controls anything in this world.
Igor Mikhailovich, well, really, you've just mentioned this uncontrollable chaos, but basically,
It's terrifying.
in a consumer society, indeed, only one format or a way out of this situation is being imposed. It's quite a rebellious format.
No.
The format of revolutions.
No, the format of a revolution which was made. Let's recall the revolution of 1917, right? That was on the territory of Russia. What did it lead to? To the establishment of, let's say, a totalitarian state with a severe regime that was ruled by whom? Also by people. So was it good or bad, if we look at it, with a number of restrictions? Despite the fact that they were developing social sphere for people and many other fields, they talked about a lot of good things. But what was their first mistake? They did well for themselves and badly for people. But the question is, how did that revolution end? To make rich people poorer, almost like what we are talking about now. Only we are not talking about making the rich poor, guys. We are talking about making the poor rich. And the difference here is substantial.
What should be done in this situation when people's discontent is growing rapidly, when such a boiling point is approaching in society?
There is indeed a boiling point. And so that it won't happen, the main and most important thing has occurred. The precedent has taken place. It's publicity. When, well, let's say, As a woman, you know what happens if one puts a lid on the pot when it's boiling.
It boils out.
It starts boiling, knocks off the lid, turns into chaos, right? Well, it's good if it's not a flammable environment there. It won't get on the open fire. There is water or something, it might extinguish it. Well, to prevent such overflowing and spilling, the lid just needs to be removed, right? Everything is simple. So publicity is exactly this precedent which was made by people themselves and is even supported by politicians now. I see it all starting to spread around the world. This is exactly what it means that the lid has been removed.
Meaning, to remove the lid is basically for people not to be silent, right?
Absolutely right.
In modern society, about what they really feel.
Yes.
About what has been boiling over in them, what they truly want.
They can speak about it. They can act in this direction. It is clear that the transition might be long, whether people will do it or not. At least they speak about it. And the process itself, when they stopped being afraid and whispering in the kitchen, but they started talking openly about it. And they see that, even in America, pardon me, they speak freely about it. And so people all over the world have already relaxed all the more. They have relaxed.
Exactly.
They've started talking about it, but whether it will proceed to action or not, well, it's already up to people to decide. And again, the question here is, to what actions? If it's not a controllable process, if it's chaos, then there are more revolutions. This is, well, again, this is not, again, everything is bad, again, everything is wrong. Meaning, people attempting to solve this order, which is uncivilized or, let's say, harmful to humanity, try to turn it into something beneficial and creative by means of violence. Well, this is irrational.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also such a question. The system has accustomed people to shifting such sort of responsibility. There are elections held in different countries where we just give our vote, shift the responsibility.
That's what we've been accustomed to.
Yes, we give our trust to some person.
That's what people have been accustomed to. If we take a look at history, after all, people always hoped for a good king to come and so on. This was supported by religions all over the world. They were established for this. Well, there was such an alliance. And this came from time immemorial. Back in Sumer, priests talked about this. Obey, hope, there will come, delegate your power to someone, they will do it for you, they will decide it for you, meaning this is very convenient for the system, and human consciousness supports this. Well, this would have continued and everyone would have kept playing at it if it were not for June of 2015, when everything changed.
When people understand that they themselves take responsibility in particular actions.
Right after that, people began to understand much.
What I've liked even from people's responses is that they say our task for the future and for society the last chance 2020 is not just to come and be present. Our task is to do our best, that for the creative and constructive society it's particular real actions, first and foremost, and not a tick on the ballot sheet.
You see, you voiced yourself now. You voiced that people are ready to take action. People are ready to act, and people rise up. That is, people talk about this, and people rise, as they say, from their knees to their feet. And this is precisely a harbinger that no matter how it's going to be and to unfold, but the consumer-based order has become obsolete. It's clear why it is being supported now by politicians and other people. By many people who are more far-sighted and they understand perfectly, well, that this is an urgent situation, a necessity. These are not our fantasies anymore. Like we said, let's imagine, but this is reality. After all, what is happening with climate today? We have already talked a lot about it.
Modern mass media certainly keep this quiet because we know that there are information wars when information is hushed up and falsified.
Again, what is this all about? This is again the result of the consumer-based order, so as not to worry people, to keep people from being concerned. After all, the entire consumer-based format is built on lies, deception, and manipulation just so as to retain power, to retain control. Well, this is also one of the forms, meaning retention of control, so that panic doesn't spread or anything else. Well, guys, in fact, today we see perfectly well what is happening already. We warned, yes, we already talked about this a lot, and warned people that this would happen, and there are a lot of things we cannot tell you about, unfortunately. Well, people themselves understand and feel, and the most interesting thing is that even such optimists who believe that this will happen long after they are gone, Inside they understand that the world is already on the threshold. Everyone feels this and everyone understands this.
Consciousness simply postpones that this will take place not in their lifetime.
They hope.
Yes, that this will happen somewhere far away.
Well, consciousness always tells a person that don't worry, everything will be fine.
It's interesting that now scientists also know the fact that what is happening with climate just violates all, so to say, forecasts, because all mathematical...
Well, not only forecasts, but even their usual calculations are disrupted. Again, if we take climatic changes, let's take elementary things, thunderstorm, something else, some little storm, or just movement of cyclones, interaction of cyclones. After all, in the past it was easily estimated. There were no super powerful computers, but there were observers who, let's even take earlier times back when people contacted by telegraph, they estimated everything much better than nowadays. Supermodern computers with observations from space, satellites, pardon me, see and know everything, everything can be calculated.
Meaning there is...
Yet weather forecasters tell us that there will be no rain today, while we go outside and get rained on. Well, this joke has always been topical, of course, but today they openly say that it is possible to forecast, just for a day or two. Why is this happening? Because the main thing that lies in the nature of air masses movement is not taken into account. After all, it was believed, and it is unfortunately believed until today, that it's exactly a rise of warm air. The cooler descends, molecular movements takes place that cause these shifts of molecular masses, they interact among themselves. Well, why tell this? Whoever wants to will read. This is exactly the main cause of the movement. Now the sun has become hotter, or something happened in a wrong way. Well, after all, just as the sun was, temperature on the sun hasn't actually changed. Well, the situation has changed. And why does it change along with the cycle of approximately 12,000 years? After all, the one who now defends the anthropogenic factor is either a misguided person who has believed in the information that is implanted into him. Well, especially when scientists, climatologists who exactly study this cause and tell about this, let's say, then it turns out that a scientist is just a title, isn't it? I wish to express this in a civilized manner so as not to offend people, or the misguided ones look at their specialty, and on the issue of climate in general in a way that is too narrow. Well, or they were simply told so and they say this. That is, they don't care about the truth, about life, about other people at all, because those people are strangers to them. The main thing for them is that they have now been given 30 pieces of silver, and so they stand and defend this viewpoint offered to them for a purse of silver. I mean, defending the anthropogenic factor.
I wanted to...
That a human is to blame for everything. That's what I mean.
I also wanted to ask about this.
And what about cycles? Well, here's a simple question for them. Basically, if you defend the anthropogenic factor, guys, humanity has expanded. We have cut the trees down. We have contaminated the oceans. We, pardon me, generate too much greenhouse gas. We create problems, and this has affected climate, which put humanity on the verge of survival. Well, it is gradually shifting beyond this verge already. Right? Is humanity to blame? And what about, wait a minute, if you believe in this in science, hence you're Darwinists, right? Right. However, people rely on science because scientists are serious guys. 12,000 years ago, there were people, but there were no factories and steamboats. So trees were not cut down. There was no, pardon me, plastic that contaminated oceans. There were no chemicals that contaminated. Yet what about the cycles that took place every 12,000 years? When we approached the fact of floods, and many other things, not very pleasant ones, obliterated life from planet Earth almost completely. And these cycles, if we trace by geology, they are repeated with an obvious frequency, you know, like an alarm clock rings every morning, for some reason at the same time.
Here, Igor Mikhailovich, right away I have several, there are several directions of what question to ask you.
And I have found a solution to this riddle. I'll give them a hint. In the past, a very long time ago, when humanity was still sitting on trees, these cycles already took place. Do you know what was there? There was a mutation of a banana with peas. It's a joke, forgive me. I don't see any other explanation, okay? Well, this is the only reason why there was so much greenhouse gas and why these cycles took place. Well, how can we explain this otherwise? Or in such case, we'll have to agree that there were other civilizations that reached a peak, right? Well, which are evidenced by numerous artifacts, and not only those. Well, this is just ridiculous. Then it turns out that we are being lied to our whole life, aren't we? We are being told that we originated from a monkey. We were growing up and learning to walk, and very recently we only discovered what a wooden axe was, and then we learned to make stone ones. And we are being told that at the time when we were still running around with stone axes, it appears there was a civilization here. Well, not worse than the one today.
Why is it beneficial to the system?
With nuclear weapons and everything else. The consumer-based format. Just that, tritely. Thus, the system establishes religious institutions which tell us that there is God, and it immediately creates a direct opposite notion that there is no God. Evolution, what God? Molecules got together accidentally, and there appeared tailless monkeys. Such a mutation.
Basically, the system says that these moral and ethical values aren't needed, that the whole point is animal-like survival.
Wait a minute, and what kind of moral and ethical values can there be if we have one life? And whoever gets through it better here, whoever ensconces himself better, and closer to some feedings through, finds a better, warmer place, then one has lived better and more cunningly. Well, again, and what about the instinct? One has to take care of one's own posterity. This is what begets and supports the consumer-based format. And what is the consumer-based format? Well, it's exactly slavery, a slavish existence. What does a person think about all day long? About his spiritual development, about, pardon me, the development of some, let's say, some aesthetic tastes, right? Meaning, he familiarizes himself with literature, with some understanding of Picasso paintings, that very black square by Malevich, we have mentioned it today. He's trying to find a deep meaning in it, which is not there. Well, this is at least, you know, some illusion of life, or indeed something. Well, is it so or not?
Alas, yes, Igor Mikhailovich, and also...
A modern person has no time because he's concerned about how to pay off loans, how to earn a penny, how to support his family. Those who are a bit richer are concerned about how to become even richer, because there are richer ones who control and manipulate them, and who represent a much greater danger for him than he is for ordinary people. And this ladder goes on to infinity. While those who are very, very rich, they are afraid of losing this because they know, as soon as they become a little poorer, or miss something, their own friends, like cockroaches, will immediately embezzle their entire wealth and grind them into dust. Well, such is life. Meaning there is sheer manipulation of a human, and humankind as a whole by the system. And people forget about elementary things.
Igor Mikhailovich, regarding the fact that there isn't much time, what do those very scientists, those very politicians not see when talking about the anthropogenic factor? After all, there exists a certain intelligence system. And why is it promoting this idea of the anthropogenic factor, and that people bear responsibility and blame?
Back then, even Tsiolkovsky wrote that the system exists.
That they want to postpone.
Yes.
Once you've mentioned and shared that the system wants to impose on people the idea that they can change something in the upcoming events.
An illusion. Yet again, where is this coming from? From the inner understanding of people that they really can. It simply makes and twists everything in such a way that people believe that they can, but they still do nothing. And hence, nothing happens. Meaning, once again, it's an illusion, a lie, a lie. The biggest liar is the devil, and there's information about this in all the teachings that were brought here by the prophets. Isn't this what they were talking about? It is. That the biggest illusion is the illusion of a person's life. A person doesn't live here, he shapes his life here. And when a person forgets about this, that he should exist here in such a way so as to obtain life in the end, that's when a disaster happens. Then a person loses that which is life. But this is beneficial to the system. What is the consumer-based format? Well, it's a replication of the system, of the system's attitude towards a person. Consume and rule.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, touching upon this consumer-based format, this quite an aggressive format of society, I'd like to raise such a question as well. After all, if we have a look at history, since ancient times, any conflicts, any aggression, any war have been justified by the system in one way or another as a war for justice.
Well, there are always someone's financial interests. And any war, pardon me, is always financial interests of one person or several people, of the one who has started it all, the one who benefits from this action. This is true, while everything else is lies. When people fight for some ideals, for some vindications, well, this is actually, it should be explained to the masses somehow why they are driven to slaughter like cattle. Well, let's take banally any ancient wars, so that not to be accused of sticking to the modern times. One king would go and take from another king, but would justify and say that he was leading people to freedom, the freedom of Alexander of Macedonia, let's recall, the great liberator.
Hegemony, yes.
He was supposedly bringing freedom to people. How many of them did he slaughter, enslave, and deprive of everything on the way? Freedom from what? From life? From their, well, let's say, household, from their savings, right? Is that what he was liberating them from? The greatest liberator. And what has changed?
It's just that each of them sort of started wars in one way or another in order to have peace on his terms.
In order to, well, surely, certainly.
Igor Mikhailovich, and
he created an illusion for others, while in fact did all this in order to seize more power. There's never enough power for a human. And that's why a human shouldn't possess power.
And what should a human possess?
Responsibility. But not power. Power it, no matter how good a person is. Well, let's have a look on the scale of a state. What do we see? No matter how good a ruler is, he cannot decide and mustn't decide for the entire society, for the entire state, for all the people. And what do we see in a country? It is precisely one person or a group of people who adopts laws. They create such conditions for the life of the entire society. And then they suggest, if you don't like this, choose others. But nothing changes. Well, some minor changes, but not more. In actual fact, it's people who should decide how they should live. And they should appoint people who actually execute, meaning the executors. And they should watch. If he executes something improperly, he gets replaced, and that's it. And he is liable for losses or something else. Then there will be no corruption, there will be nothing like that. Well, this is such a fantastic world you and I are talking about.
That is, a person should participate in society life during the entire process of his activities.
After all, this is his life. How else can it be? This is his life. If a person, excuse me, doesn't care about his life in society, then others will do that. As soon as he has delegated his authority, he has lost the concept of power. Power should belong to people, meaning to society. This is stipulated in the constitution of any country. However, when he gives all this away, delegates it to someone, yet how does it happen in our society? To shift responsibility to someone else, right? However, this is not the most terrible thing. This only relates to human life. But when a person delegates authority of his spiritual salvation to a clergyman or a priest, that's already a problem. How come? It's the person's work. Well, pardon me, in his everyday, let's say such a mundane life, he should take care of himself and decide in accordance with people how to build life so that it's beneficial for both you and me, so that it is comfortable, so that we think about our posterity, about our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so that we now build such an order which will give them even a better life, right? And in the spiritual aspect, all the more, a person should think about himself, because it is said, no one will go through the door instead of you. Yet what do? We come, repent to a priest, well, as Christians. We light a candle, then run away and forget, don't we? The priest will read prayers for us, and what about the priest? The priest needs to save himself. He's the same human as everyone else, only in different clothes. He comes to work, puts the clothes on, and that's it, and he's at work.
Also in the structure.
That's how it's arranged in this modern community.
However, the system having divided people in the same way into some categories. Like there are categories of politicians, there are ordinary people, there are religious organizations.
Pardon me, again, there is a category of politicians, there are ordinary people. And who are the politicians? Aren't they people? Who are they, in your opinion? What are they called? Reptilians, right? As some people say.
Some people say, yes, that they rule our world, this world.
There are reptilians who rule the world, right? And some people say that aliens rule our world. While in actual fact, why would people need those very reptilians, those very aliens, when there is, pardon me, consciousness, the system? And who actually rules this world? This consumer-based format of the modern world, people or the system? And everyone says the system, right? Yet everyone understands it in his own way. It's a system of mutual relations, a system of something else. Well, and if we translate it into the language of religion, is it the devil, let's say, or a human who rules this world? By shape, he's a human, but who controls this human? Why would humanity need various reptilians and aliens when Satan manipulates them? And there is no other explanation. Why do people live? Well, it's already the 21st century. It's already what year, right, of the 21st century, while we are still like animals. Taking into account that we have a lot of religions, and there are plenty of various ones, and there are religions with thousands of years of history, what explanation can be found except the power of the devil? That he rules this world, right? You don't find anything else.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also a question regarding the participation of every person in the life of, so to say, society, and in the formation of this creative and constructive...
Well, again, what is the life of society? It is first and foremost his life.
And so people wonder, how can these changes in me affect the life of the whole society in any way? I'm just one person, an ordinary person. How can I...
Well, one, yes, surely. And what is one? A unit of measurement, if we look at, let's say, a couple of dimensions higher, right? Meaning, let's actually fantasize a little from the world, looking at humanity from the perspective of the spiritual world. Humanity is what? Is it a multitude or a unit? It's a multitude...
A whole, a unit.
Right, a multitude in unity, that is...
A multitude of units in one unit.
A whole unit, which consists of a multitude of units. There is still a unit, no matter how you twist it, whether it's one person or society as a whole. Therefore, can one person influence the state of the whole society? He can. And we see many historical facts when one person changed the life of, let's say, a great number of people or of an entire community, right? While there were people who were... One person was the cause of destruction of the whole civilization, and more than once. So a unit can do a lot. However, if a person belittles and diminishes himself, it means who is the commander inside him? He, as a free personality, or pardon me, the demon is giving orders in his head. If he listens to and obeys the demon in his head, then he needs neither the creative and constructive society nor anything else. He needs to live just like he lives, in obedience to the devil. And everything will be fine with him, but not for long, right? That is, humanity is still a unit. And there is an interesting point here. An example of the responsibility of a unit as a part of the whole, right? Meaning, for instance, when, as of today, I'll just give an example, a bit obscure one. May our friends forgive us. But it gives an understanding. When there is a contact, again, from the perspective of the metaphysics, fiction, yet we are actually fantasizing. And our program today is extraordinary in general. Well, let's give liberty to our thinking, so to say. When the two worlds come into contact, well, let's express it this way. Then what happens automatically? An interaction.
Right.
Which is reflected on something. If we take the position of the spiritual world and the material world, they can, so to say, come into contact. A human being is exactly manifestation of duality. They can somehow be combined in him or her in one form, but with certain delimitations. However, if these two worlds come into contact in their pure state, it's not like, for instance, a clean towel touching a dirty towel, what will happen? A simple example.
It will become dirty in this three-dimensionality.
The white and clean one will get dirty, while the dirty one won't become cleaner anyway. It was dirty and so it will remain dirty. So, if the spiritual world comes into contact with the material world will cease to exist, meaning the laws are a bit different here, and what I am talking about now, even from the position of the material world, goes far beyond the quantum limit, but it gives an explanation and an understanding of how events originate. Still, in the pre-quantum limit and how particles interact afterwards in such more manifested states, that which we call quantum entanglement, why people get thoughts about the same thing at the same time, although they are on different continents, well, it gives many other answers too. Here is a simple example. Responsibility of one person who as a unit assumes responsibility, for example, for a country as a whole, and how this affects the country on a whole. After all, his position has to be reflected quite tremendously, and it is reflected on the life of the society as a whole. And here it is very important how a person perceives and positions himself. If he perceives and positions himself, for example, as being tough, well, as a beast, then basically all his beastly antiques don't have a strong impact on the society because it itself lives under such beastly consumer management. And all this is sort of normal. But if a person begins to position himself, works on himself even a little bit in a spiritual sense, and kind of as an understanding and contact with the spiritual world, then it is scary for the community itself, which lives under his, so to say, power. Let's say in quotation marks, but actually under his power. What happens then? Let's take a trite example. People who are also on spiritual position address him, and he ignores them. That is, he ignores the appeal of people who defend the spiritual positions. Whom does this affect? It affects his personal life and the society as a whole, right? And what does this result in? Meaning, in a misfortune for people. The reaction takes place instantly. Why? Because, well, I've already given an example of a towel. And here the responsibility is also huge. May power be delegated to one person. It's better to bear it all together by sharing, then there won't be such fluctuations, and there will be substantially fewer of such troubles.
Igor Mikhailovich, now that we've already touched upon physics a little bit, I would also like to proceed to the topic of climate, because scientists have noticed that the volcanic activity, let's say, on other planets in the solar system, in one way or another, affects the climate change here, in this world, on this planet. What kind of an effect is that?
Well, I would put it this way. We've just talked precisely about this. These are interactions which people won't find an explanation for yet. This goes even far beyond banal quantum entanglements. A simple example, you've just mentioned, the volcanic activity on other planets causes the volcanic activity, let's say...
On our planet, where we are.
On our planet, right? Well, let's not give the most recent example, but it can be easily tracked. Italy and satellites, well, it doesn't matter. But since climate affects climate, you've touched upon this. Yes, volcanoes do affect climate to some extent, but also, here we've mentioned an emergence of that very tornado, or let's say a storm is emerging. Or again, we return to the fact that the interaction of cyclones and anticyclones occurs, let's say. So what do people not take into account? Today, people don't take into account exactly the increased activity, that which was less noticeable and wasn't the dominant factor. As of today, as we have already said, starting from 2015, it's been the main dominant factor. Why? Was the climate changing? However, approximately around 2015, it accelerated drastically, and since 2015, it's been basically a disaster. Yet the disaster isn't just with climate, the same began in people's minds. Well, we'll get back to the minds later. We are responding regarding climate. Those processes that occur inside our planet as a part of a single whole, let's say. I mean, our planet constitutes a single whole with something greater. In this case, not with the entire universe, but let's say with a small group, which we call the galaxy. And these interactions also affect our climate. That's why it turns out that the computers estimate that having collided masses of hot and cold air should change direction there, while it all happens in quite the opposite way. Therefore, it turns out that a sharp descent of cold masses, without warm masses lifting up, causes what we observe now. Well, and there happens, we're in Ukraine. And how many tornadoes have already occurred in Ukraine this year?
Scientists are really sounding an alarm because
And this is just the beginning.
tornadoes appear here in Europe on the Eurasian plate, which has never occurred before.
Well, a simple question. When were tornadoes observed in Ukraine? Yes, we saw them on TV in America. It's normal.
Far away, right?
Somewhere else they happen very rarely, but now, pardon me, they destroy forests and residential areas. And this becomes a regular norm.
It's also interesting how mass media act in consumer society, because I would just like to give an example regarding the United States of America, when some people, having heard a lot of what is said in the media, of what some scientists say, suggest ideas on how hurricanes can be stopped. They suggest stopping them with nuclear weapons, and they actually address representatives of their states so that they take some measures. We are a civilized society. We are a highly developed country. Let's solve this issue somehow. What do people not take into account?
What do they not take into account?
Is it possible to stop a hurricane with nuclear weapons?
Well, you see, when it's being instilled in people that we are the greatest and the most serious, and we have the biggest nuclear bomb, and we'll stop everything with it, people begin to think, well, what's the problem with stopping, for instance, a storm or some kind of a tornado by means of nuclear weapons? Well, let's imagine a storm is arising. Or some people see something, say, the United States have recently gone through several severe moments, and our deep condolences to them for that. Yet what would happen if they, let's say, exploded a nuclear bomb in the epicenter of what was approaching them, of that storm? Here's a simple question.
Unpredictable consequences, of course.
Well, why unpredictable? Guys, this is physics. All this is easily calculated. Let them calculate on their own. It's more interesting this way. I'll put it simply. I would like to be as far from that place as possible. This is solely my personal opinion.
Well, this gives rise to one more important issue. After all, they've heard this information from mass media one way or another. And here the point is that this is clearly traced in society. And this information wars depending on, we see this by what they instill in the minds of society, what they instill in the minds of the population. And we understand that, indeed, the one who controls information owns the world today.
Not at all. That was recently. Well, absolutely, let's put it this way. Until recently, the one who in fact controlled information he owned and controlled the world, so to say. Now this is not so. Now the one who controls climate controls the world. And this is right. Here's a simple explanation, a simple example, right? Information, yes, it plays a great role. Who, where, what they want, when they are doing something. Well, all this is easily checked nowadays. Entire systems are created. People spend enormous amounts of money in order to know basically what I buy, what I like, what you and I talk about, so as to look at us by means of this screen here. If they want to, they will do this no matter where you are. It's elementary. This way they know the mood, they know and possess everything. And all of this has turned into dust. Climate, it destroys worlds, not just some information. And climate, pardon me, exists not only on the planet, it exists in the galaxy, and in galactic communities. Everything has its climate. Therefore, the one who, let's say, lives truly by the spiritual has the right to what? To life. While the one who lives like an animal has the right to what? To death. Black and white are completely different things. Many might say, what are we talking about? But fortunately, many have understood us. As one person once said, let the dead take care of the dead, right? While the alive ones will follow me. And this says a lot. It's like we say, people start on a merry note, just like you and me, but finish on a sad one as always. Same with you and me. Well, let's continue.
Sad ending of the system, right?
It's unavoidable. And the most interesting thing is that everyone feels this. Even atheists who believe neither in God nor in the devil, well, consciousness tells them this way. But inside they do feel that the end of the system is near. But in which version is already up to the community to decide. And all this, let's say, is rage. These precedents when people begin to talk openly about converting the consumer-based format into a creative and constructive one, this is precisely the consequence, the result, of people's greater spiritual freedom. However, consciousness has a firm hold over people and they cannot understand what's going on and are looking in the external. Well, this is also a good manifestation. Well, if people don't want to live, let them at least make the world a better place. It would certainly be perfect if Eden were here as well, and people would leave it for life. I believe that people are worthy of this, because there is a part of the spiritual world in them, there is a spirit in them, which they receive on the 8th day after birth, and the spiritual component is driven into slavery. Into slavery to whom? To Satan? And then they destroy the person himself as well.
I really like this tendency which is now being observed in society, that people have stopped being silent, that these manipulative political technologies have stopped working.
They're stopping. No, it's still there. It's all still expressed, but less and less all the time. It's already being noted that everything is collapsing. What was previously programmed via mass media, via everything, nowadays even mass media are starting to protest, meaning this system is already wobbling. But again, this is...
People have already lost trust, right, in them.
No, this is precisely the result of people's inner transformation. People are becoming sort of more free spiritually. In one of the previous programs, we mentioned that the system is starting to cut down expenses. It's getting prepared for serious changes to itself. It will have to release humankind again for 6,000 years or so, and then to defeat it again through some Sumerians. Well, and everything all over again. Or to completely close this, that which we call the planet Earth, this sphere, and to abandon this territory.
Society, as a unit, has a great chance to create...
Of course it has. Well, the thing is that society is a unit consisting of many units. And the whole complexity here lies in domination of consciousness in many people in this world. After all, people are divided, and we already talked about this many times, both by religions and by social statuses and by understandings, and again by control, simply put, by consciousness control. And consciousness tells many people that, come on, all this is not so, and so on. Because consciousness basically doesn't even let people engage in spiritual self-development, really engage in spiritual self-development. Banally, it doesn't even let them observe themselves, keep a diary and write down thoughts. We have raised these issues so many times, and people come across this, well, or there are simple examples when they know everything, know how to do everything, understand that there is the system, understand that consciousness is literally exploiting them. They feel, they already even experience major flashes of a light contact. But they lose. From time to time, consciousness literally enslaves them once again and makes them get emotional, feed the system, worry about some thoughts in the head, feel inner belittling, well, and all the rest. And then they wonder why. Well, just because the system wants to eat. They say, but what should we do? Well, a simple question, what to do? Not to feed the system. If you want to live, just live. If you don't want to live, then feed the system. Everything's really simple.
Yes, to this day, people still have such questions.
And a lot of them.
Well, with this...
But it's already good that at least people feel. They already come into contact, right? They already understand that the world is dual. This is not schizophrenia, this is not a hallucination when a strange voice sounds in your head. There is no need to run to a doctor, because it sounds in the doctor's head too. People already understand at least this. This is also good.
It's just that examples of the Allat movement participants are truly inspiring. Even when working on their creative projects, they work first and foremost on themselves as well.
Certainly.
And they really clarify and unveil these secret actions of the system, what imprints it sends into their heads. And it's interesting how people shared recently that at some point, one and the same thought comes to different people from different corners of the world, literally simultaneously, that I've ruined everything, I'm capable of nothing.
Belittling.
Right, but it's just how important.
It's a form of manipulation.
Here I would also like to say how important it is that they have voiced this.
And this is already a step.
And what happens if one keeps these thoughts in secret? What do they not see when...
It means to be subordinate to the system.
How is it reflected?
Whereas when people understand, they already talk about this openly. After all, the first thing is stop lying and stop being silent. That is, what is a free community? Free means an understanding that a person doesn't lie to himself, he doesn't lie to the society, that he speaks freely about that which the system doesn't want him to talk about.
There are no double standards.
What kind of secrets can there be? Something else, especially when it comes to this, well, let's say, that which has to do with attaining life.
Also, I've recalled that once you shared and told us that when a person keeps silent about the voice of the system, then how this is reflected on society globally, on where the society is going in relation to...
We've just discussed, he's like a unit, which, pardon me, fractally, repeats society as a whole and is an integral part of a single whole. If he serves Satan, whose positions does he strengthen if we translate this to three-dimensionality? The positions of Satan's power over people, not over the spiritual world, not over God, no. But personality is enslaved precisely by deceit. Deceit by whom? By Satan. First of all, well, if we speak the language of religion, well, isn't that so?
Who stops a person at this moment?
What happens? A substitution. A person thinks that he is a consciousness, that the thoughts in his head are his thoughts, that such stupid or wise thoughts come to him. He is their creator, right? Desires that sometimes force a person, for example, to jump from the roof of a high-rise building, pardon me, are his desires. That is, a person resorts to self-destruction, to suicide. Well, a suicide may be different, a latent or a quick one, but what's the difference? If a person isn't on a path to the spiritual world, if a person doesn't really live for the sake of spiritual salvation, hence he's a banal suicide. Isn't that so, guys? That is, quickly or slowly, well, this is the choice of every person, but the fact is the end result. If in the course of your life, well, I mean of the brief test sample, you don't acquire life eternal, then what is the meaning of your existence? Tell me, will this person engage in spiritual and creative activities? Of course not. He will strengthen the ranks of whom? Exactly the ranks of opposing party, that is, exactly the ranks of Satan, as they say in religions, right?
It turns out that the system also understands that people want to build a creative and constructive society.
Well, certainly.
And it appears that it acts through them, right?
Who else can it act through? Of course.
So
Again, people will be manipulated. You will see how many people will support this idea, and how many of the dead ones, let's say, will stand in the way of the alive and defend the inevitably dead. Why? Because a free, creative and constructive society ensures development. It gives time and freedom. Willing or not, a person begins to observe, not just to ponder everything. He begins to observe what and who is pondering in him. And this is already a step towards internal spiritual freedom. The system doesn't benefit from this.
to get prepared for the fact that it will act in us and through us, through our thoughts, in order to stop
Of course.
this creative process,
Certainly.
even through such expressions
Through.
as "I've ruined everything," right?
Well, even as you say, I've ruined everything, I've done it wrong, and the like. I'll put it simple, if a person has done something and he's done something wrong, this can always be changed. But if a person has done nothing, then nothing changes. And the most terrible thing is what?
Inaction.
Idlers.
The system accustoms people to being idle in society,
Of course.
to shift responsibility to each other. After all, it's also interesting to what extent, even in this issue of who should be responsible for the creative and constructive society,
People.
or who should, however people think that
Everyone. Yet not someone else, not your neighbor, it's you. Why? If you haven't convinced your neighbor to stand alongside you, then it's your fault. If you haven't conveyed this to, while understanding and knowing the importance of this issue, yet you haven't conveyed this to others, to your friends and acquaintances, it's your fault, first of all. Isn't it so?
absolutely right.
This means you're living in what you like. If you're satisfied with this brevity of existence in slavery, well, there are positive points for the prideful ones here. One can boast about something and make someone jealous. One can sit and envy or whine or pity oneself, depending on what existence a person has got used to, because this cannot be called life. However, this is a lot of whom? It's a lot of the inevitably dead ones.
This explains a great deal why every one of us inside wants
One thing,
but in fact,
we do something completely different.
as a society, we see a completely different result.
Right, why?
Because we're inactive, we only wish this in our thoughts.
Because even though we understand and feel, we are inactive. We obey the little Satan, the little imp in the head, and fulfill its will, like banal slaves, like well-trained dogs. But people aren't dogs. People are potential angels. They are eternally alive and free, but they have to become the ones. And in order to become, you must first of all get up from the couch and not listen to consciousness that says you cannot do anything. You can. A human being can do everything, but only if he isn't lazy.
To abandon this coach army.
Absolutely right.
It was very inspiring how people after the events of May 11th and June 22nd share that it's as if their hands have gotten tied and there has appeared freedom to speak and to act.
The precedent, that is, well, literally, what they feel and desire, they see it coming true. Well, is this really bad? It's the same as watching a flower coming into bloom. After all, it's interesting, it's beautiful.
People also spoke about the fact that there are a lot of us, there are thousands of us, and we all want one and the same thing.
And what does consciousness say? You are alone, you cannot do anything. Well, it's enough to open your eyes and turn yourself towards people, and you'll see that there are millions, billions of you.
Yes, it's exactly this manipulation technology concerning the spiral of silence, which is used by both various politicians and mass media, who convince people that
It doesn't work anymore.
yes, because it's obvious.
It has also given a crack. Their spiral has already broken. It was before that it worked, when they accused and hushed things up. Well, and people obeyed unquestioningly, whereas now, look, people all over the world are rising and stirring, and even mass media know that something strange is happening. And a lot of people notice that, in reality, something is happening to people, as a community on the whole, which is far beyond understanding, right? Most people feel that something is happening. And there is an important point here, that even those who deny metaphysics and whatever else, they feel that they are not just a reflection in the mirror, not just consciousness, not just a body. They feel that there is something that unites, and this feeling begins to intensify in every person, and a lot of things change. And actually, if we look closely, even at the work of our brain, well, let's say this should be particularly noticeable to experts. Those habitual rhythms that used to be there before now have deviations almost in everyone. Meaning, this is already manifested even in such physical laws, because everything is changing and this entire world is changing. Changes are taking place, not just in climate, not just in our planet, but, as they say, in our heads as well. And at the same time, these changes are taking place in our hearts. They start beating more loudly. This is particularly prevalent lately when the call appeared. Many people don't hear it, but it's not heard until you pay attention to it. Yet, a lot of people feel that something is needed. They understand that something has to be done. Well, unfortunately, imps get in the way and consciousness starts pushing people in the direction beneficial to it. After all, a person follows his feelings that something is needed, but there is no understanding, and there is a habit to perceive what? To perceive consciously through consciousness. What needs to be done, where to run, what to do, meaning there is such an instruction for action. But unfortunately, this is what imps takes advantage of, and they push people wherever possible. Yet, what's most important is that people have started changing, that something extremely important is happening. Well, but there is also another point. How people will use these changes. After all, this can bring humanity to a ruin, or on the contrary, can give people what they don't even dream about, that which is called the golden millennium, but which can exist much longer than 1,000 years. Everything depends on people's choice. What you choose, my friends, is what will be. Everything depends on human being. Well, let's proceed to our questions, as we've got off track.
But it's really interesting that this life is boiling up.
Of course it's boiling.
Already seethes inside every person, inside really everyone. It is growing, and this compulsory need is felt
Well, right.
to act, to express.
And people can already hardly remain sitting. There is this need to act indeed. The only problem is just that the imp still has power over personality. Personalities, let's put it so, have not grown up yet, but energy is supplied in greater amount while the system is saving up, so this arising dissonance leads to the fact that people feel a need, but don't know for what. They don't know, we want, but don't know what we want. You know how it is. Well, but it's actually a good time.
Of changes for the better.
It's the time of changes, but it's up to people to choose whether it's for the better or for the worse. It's not up to us to decide. So to say, the freedom of choice. But in any case, there are fewer and fewer of those who are indifferent. And this is already wonderful.
There are no indifferent people, right?
It's the most important point, that there are no indifferent people.
Very often, speaking of what was mentioned there, about that very spiral of silence, such point is observed. Why people keep silent? After all, the system imposes on people that they are in the minority, and people have this fear, a fear of some retaliation from the system, or a fear to be isolated from society. So it turns out that every person by nature has this understanding of the fact that he wants to and has to be, well, in some sort of social environment, to be together, in unity with people, in community with people.
And I'll put it simply, a person who's even among a large number of people, isn't he alone? He really remains alone if he, again, serves the system itself. After all, this entire community plays a role as long as you're in contact with it. It's enough for you to turn away when you don't see them and they disappear. If there is a spiritual community, then no matter where you are and no matter where they are, you are still together. Isn't it so?
Every person is looking for a different kind of unity.
Of course. However, what does Satan do? He separates. He just literally separates people. Meaning consciousness is separated and is individual for everyone. And this consciousness makes a person believe that he is consciousness. And thus, due to massive supply of information, personality ceases to perceive and distinguish where personality is, where you are, and where consciousness is. And everything is perceived in such a mishmash that when a child is growing, and again, even when a child is growing, what predominates? Again, development of consciousness, perception of this world, processes of survival, of mastering language, well, and so on. And who grows up? An ordinary person, right? Meaning the one who submits to consciousness, who firmly believes, even in the modern world, with the current development of neurophysiology, psychophysiology, and all the rest, a person still truly believes that he is precisely consciousness, and he is body, and he is inevitably dead. Well, since he believes in this, since he pays for this, hence he will be like this, right? Since he invests attention into this. Why does a human seek to be in a community? Because he feels a longing, and internally he understands. He understands this from personality, that all are united. And this very unity, that's the inner need coming from personality, which gets easily twisted by consciousness, meaning, well,
Consciousness simply gives some unions of its own.
of course,
And wipes out.
well, it unites according to interests, as a rule, exploitative ones, but not more.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, when you said that the Holy Spirit is the spirit of this honesty, well, an understanding has sort of formed, and thanks to the fact that participants of the Allatra movement have now started speaking openly and frankly about what they feel, and about what is genuine, about what is inside.
Surely, about what is alive.
And you understand to what extent the transformation is taking place. When in a particular situation, it's this value of honesty that is important for you, and not the value of comfort or fear. After all, most people keep silent because of fear.
Surely.
To speak because of fear.
Well, not so much because of fear, but because the system itself dictates, you see? Meaning, it's a lie again. After all, even silence is a lie. A person obeys consciousness, obeys lies. His tongue is tied by that very demon, so what good is this person? He sort of says, if I cannot have it, neither can you, right?
Yes, that...
Again, continuation of serving someone, even understanding and knowing. He keeps investing his attention in the inevitably dead. Why? Because he says, I cannot do otherwise. Whom does this come from? I cannot do otherwise. Once again, it's even a thought. This understanding says, I just feel that I cannot. You don't feel, you understand. You cannot feel this. Because perception through feelings comes from the spiritual world. While this is a sensation, illusions of a feeling which even manifests itself physically, but physical manifestation and manifestation through feelings are different things. However, if a person has never had perception through feelings, let's say, of that very God's love, this tells him nothing. And instead of learning this, what does he follow? A simple path as consciousness prompts him, right? So much for all the phenomena. Again consciousness, again deception, and again lies. Whereas there should be what? Absolute honesty. Then everything falls into place. That's when freedom is born.
Main values, yes.
That's when life is born. Everything's very simple.
There is also such a question being raised that consciousness tells that in our society, under such conditions as we have now, it's impossible to be absolutely honest, that it is sort of unsafe.
Let's say there should be clear differentiation, right? Dead to the dead, living to the living. And when we talk to the living about the living, we should be absolutely honest. But, for example, in the business sphere or something else, if a person openly declares that he's alive, he'll remain alive among the dead, but will definitely be beaten up because of tried envy and hatred of the system itself. In those people, and because of their inner flaw, they will perceive this person in a bad way. Who in a person opposes those very saints and all the rest, even the Holy Scriptures, not to mention anything else? That's precisely the inevitably dead, meaning Satan, right? Who by controlling personality agitates a person himself, and the person is being the devil's tools precisely at this moment when he confronts something holy. Well, that's why if a person is alive, or strives to be alive, he should be absolutely honest with those who are like him, and with himself in the first place. While telling the dead one that he is dead, well, I think this means at least that you'll get drawn into a certain conflict. But religions say, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, let him slap you on the left cheek too. That works with the alive, but not with the dead. The dead ones, who use power and believe in it, they fear and respect what? A greater power. Hence, if you want to be extremely honest with the dead, be strong physically.
Also, when the source of honesty is not one person, but a great number of people, then the system...
And when it's a great number, then, excuse me, the dead retreats. Because it is cowardly.
There is also such a question, Igor Mikhailovich. Yet, why are some people afraid of Allatra?
Well, it's not people who are afraid. A human being is dual. There is both an animal and a spiritual component in him. And exactly the animal component, the inevitably dead one, is afraid of Allatra. Everything is simple. Or, speaking the language of religion, it is that demon which predominates in a person that is afraid of Allatra. He's afraid of losing power over personality and afraid that personality will gain freedom and be like Imhotep in his time, meaning it will enslave this demon and force him to work for the spiritual world.
The system still remembers these events.
Well, of course, no question about it. A simple tried example. They are not just afraid, but there are those who oppose Allatra and who consider Allatra to be, well, some sort of evil, is unacceptable for humanity. Yet, who inside a person, first and foremost, fails to perceive that which is the best in the person himself, that which makes him a human? Let's repeat. Well, everyone, our viewers, our friends know what Allatra is. Allatra is a synonym for the Holy Spirit if we speak the language of Christianity, the language of religion. And what is the Holy Spirit? It's exactly God's power. And what is God's power in? In His love. It is that power which transforms this world. It's a component of all religions. It's what gives life. It's what God sent here and endowed everyone with. From time immemorial, people knew that it was called Allatra, and the sign was just like the one on this book. That is, the very notion of the Holy Spirit was depicted this way. Allat and Ra mean the power of God. This has been known from time immemorial, and these symbols are present in all religions, because it was a fundamental symbol in ancient religions. While before the time of religions, there was a clear understanding that this is, pardon me, the Holy Spirit, what we now call this day and mean by this notion, is just a synonym for the Holy Spirit.
Yet, why despite the fact that people are, well, not all people are spiritually liberated so far. Let's say there are people who live by consciousness, but they still...
Everyone feels. Indeed, everyone feels. And the only question is whether they have enough accumulation of this spirit in order to resist Satan inside themselves or not. And who a person is, an inevitably dead or an eternally alive one. After all, the alive ones won't stand against Allatra, they feel it. And how can a person be against the Holy Spirit? A simple question. Against God, against Allah, no matter what they call Him. In this case, a person rises against the truth, against life. A person rises against all the best that is in people. While that very love, respect, while all the qualities which distinguish a human being from an animal, the best qualities are nothing but manifestation of the Holy Spirit in a human. It is what spiritualizes him. Well, isn't that so? And to rise against these good qualities, reject them all, fail to perceive them, well, can anyone really? No one except the demon. Only the demon can. And if the demon predominates in a person, it means the person is inevitably dead. He is burying himself alive. Well, we can feel sorry for such people, but love cannot be forced. This is again the freedom of choice given by God. A person is entitled to choose whom to serve, either God or Satan. It's his right. If he wants to live, he lives. But if a person wants to die, it's his right. However, one should know that it's owing to the dead that the devil lives. And the more there are of alive ones, the weaker Satan will be.
Once you shared that Allatra is like a mirror.
Of course. That's also what makes a lot of people feel uneasy, right? After all, looking at Allatra, they see their reflection, they feel it. They don't see it with their earthly eyes, but they feel this. And many start feeling unwell. Why? Unwell not because of Allatra, but because of themselves. Since the negativity which is in them is being reflected, is reflected on themselves. and they see it, and it infuriates them. They start feeling discomfort. Yet whom do they blame? Exactly the one who's not guilty. Well, I put it simply, no matter how much you revile at God, He won't become worse.
But still,
Well, you should think about your own self.
so it turns out that people reach for the spiritual at all times.
They reach, of course. And let's see how many religions we have. And regardless of everything, they exist to this day, and their temples don't get empty. Regardless of brainwashing of this, as the consumer-based format of the modern society we've started with, regardless of slavish order, regardless of everything, people still reach for God. Why? Because it's their inner that is pushing and leading them. But another thing is that they are often guided by their consciousness, whereas consciousness manipulates their understandings. Again, it programs them through people. Literally, in counteraction to everything and everyone, they are being told, don't go there, don't do that, this is good, that is bad. It's people are deciding for them, meaning the imps of other people dictate to their imps how to behave, where to go, what to do, where to be and where not to be. But unfortunately, internally they do feel. And the whole point is exactly in whether a person is able to step over the dictator within himself over Satan, or he's unable to. After all, so many various, let's say, not only believers, but also clergymen are united in Allatra. But it's an indicator for others, isn't it? And many are still frightened, especially representatives of various religious organizations. We have recalled Imhotep. It's his example. They remember this Allatra follower who gathered all priests and sent them to work. And in Allatra, it is clearly written that a person should earn his living and serve God in his spare time, and there are no exceptions. Well, again, there is a desire to be someone significant, and something significant in the system of consumer-based order, right?
So consciousness is looking for something in Allatra, that Allatra would give something to this consciousness, either some glory or...
Yes, it is consciousness that tells people, here's Allatra, yes, you have accepted Allatra, but what will you get? Will you be able to turn water into wine or something else? Of course you will. Add grapes, let it ferment, and you will have wine. One must work. And there cannot be any freebie, while magic must not be practiced. And one must not ask God for anything except salvation of the soul. Well, all this goes against manipulation from the system, doesn't it? That's what is disliked. The truth is disliked because, pardon me, the Holy Spirit always tells the truth. He's truthful. And He says, if you ask from God something mortal, then you ask it from the wrong God. Not from the living God, but from the dead God. And that's what you actually are. Isn't it so? So, ask the living God for life, and don't serve the dead, for you yourselves will become dead. Everything is simple, and everything is honest.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've also mentioned a positive point that people of various religions are uniting. And not just people, but clergymen of various religions are uniting.
But they are also people. Ordinary people, just like everyone. And again, they are uniting based on what? On God's love. That is what unites them, is those who don't lie to themselves. And they have come to religion not in order, pardon me, to work for some organization, rob the poor and become richer through that. They have come to religion in order to gain life. And naturally, they cannot reject God's love, for there is no salvation without it, while Allatra is God's love.
It's joyful that there are those people who, owing to their professional experience, let's say, who have studied the system well, being in it. I mean, diplomats, and people in military institutions
They are also people.
who know how the system operates, and now all this experience.
They are also people.
Right.
Again, they also share it and use it and apply it for the benefit of society. Again, they apply it in serving God. All are people. Military men are people. And politicians are people. All are people.
It's really joyful that now in society this is not directed against one person by another person, against one country by another country, but it is directed against the true enemy of humanity.
Humanity has one enemy. It is Satan. There is no other. He is the one who lives in the human head, who dictates how to act and what to do. He is the one who instigates a person to do foolish things, the one who forces a person to be an animal instead of a human. That's why society should also, if it eventually decides to establish a creative and constructive society, it should establish it in such a way that there would be as little of Satan's power as possible. Or even better, there would be no Satan's power at all. Well, it won't be possible to eliminate it, the material world is his world, but it's possible at least to limit his capabilities. And it's realistic to give spiritual freedom to people. However, again for this you have to make an effort. You have to roll up your sleeves and act. Instead of sitting idle, dreaming and shifting responsibility to someone else who would come and do that for you. They won't come and won't do. Well, they might come, but you'll be doing that yourself. And if you don't do it, it's your choice. You have the right.
The secret activity of the system is also vast here. After all, people talk and hope that perhaps these issues will be resolved somewhere in political circles, that they have more levers of influence, while in political circles they say, wait a minute, I'm just a cog in this system.
Surely.
What can I do?
I won't be able to do anything without people's support. If people want to support me, then I'll do that. And it comes full circle.
Right.
Again, to dictation of whom?
The system.
The system. Again, it immobilizes people, both politicians and ordinary people, as you say, right? While in actual fact, all of them are just people. And what should they do? Hold out their hands to one another. Stop lying and doing stupid things. And indeed, if you want to live better, just live. Unite and act. After all, the system is often for unification.
Yes, but we have already faced such a situation when people also say that they are for unification. They want a creative and constructive society, but there are still some subtexts. There are some either on their terms
Well, surely.
or on their platform.
Here's a simple question. Which of religious organizations doesn't want to unite all religions of the world, but on its own terms? All of them want to. Which of, let's say, trade organizations doesn't want to unite everyone? All organizations engaged in trade, but on its own terms. Which of the public organizations doesn't want to unite? All of them want to. All of them want what? To dominate and to rule.
Absolutely right. Moreover, this is so fractal.
Of course.
And it is fractal at all times because...
And what is the main thing? Not to mix the dead with the alive. And then everything will work out. Why? Is Allat public movement accepted all over the world, and why is it growing by such, well, let's say, leaps and bounds? Because there is no anyone's power. People just come and do, and it depends on them whether there will be something or not. If a person hasn't come and hasn't done anything, then what he could have done hasn't advanced and hasn't been done. And people understand this perfectly well, that one person becomes a part of the whole, and a lot of depends on him, and no one dictates anything to him. Just like that, and no one demands anything from him. He does whatever he wants to do, but he does it for the benefit of society. He does it for the benefit of all people. That is, he implements his best qualities and fosters them. He won't get anything except help. He can get advice. Yes, there are some individuals, especially among those who are just joining, who are under the control of consciousness, and consciousness is trying to exploit something in some way, but all this is promptly terminated, because any dirt is visible in clear water. So Allat is the clearest water today and over the entire history of humanity. And this is true. It has always been and always will be. There will be no humanity, but Allat will be, because it is eternal, while human society is temporary. This is also true. Well, God grant that everything would end with spiritual awakening of everyone. and not with the total power of demons, and, so to say, with an end of this civilization due to its inability to live, right?
I would also like to talk about this fractality. We have now mentioned that, one way or another, everyone wants to push his terms through, living by consciousness, right? That in the same way, at all times, this very...
Fight for power.
We trace that very history.
Again.
Everyone has always wanted to make peace either on his terms, but again, this domination...
Do you know what the most interesting thing is? In any person, no matter whom we consider, we find a Napoleon in him, and we find a prophet in him, and the one who is stronger wins. Everyone. We have given so many examples, I believe, also with you, that even the most uncared for person who has neglected himself, well, what they call beggars and the like, he has ruined himself by drinking, he's an alcoholic, well, he still considers himself to be the smartest, the one who knows everything and has all the answers. Why? Because this is what consciousness is like. This is how it works. It always exalts a person in illusions. But as soon as he starts engaging in the spiritual, it immediately begins to belittle him. Well, in order not to give in to the tricks of these little demons, one should simply study them. For instance, people study snakes or lizards. Well, isn't that right? So why not study the snake which whispers all sorts of stupid things in your head, or even yells in your ear?
Right, the mechanisms of operation of the system.
Of course. After all, everything is stereotypical. These are the same programs which are easily studied. And can they do harm to a person? No. Everything is simple. For instance, today we have raised the issue when people say, I know everything, I can do everything. And supposedly I come into contact, but I still lose it. I lose the spiritual connection through feelings and fall under the power of consciousness again. Life is whirling me. How can I live so as to avoid this? Don't fund this. Just that, this is really so. Well, I'll give a simple example. You just want to eat, but you still have to walk for a whole week. To walk across a desert where there is not a single shop, there is nothing. There are not even rootlets, there's nothing to eat. For instance, you have a certain amount of money, and there is one last supermarket where you can shop. So you enter this supermarket with this certain amount of money, and here you suddenly see, well, what can it be? Beautiful brooches. What a beautiful brooch, right? Well, how can you not buy it?
In a desert.
You buy it. Then you see, well, some costume jewelry, but it's very bright and beautiful. You buy it with the rest of your money. And then you walk along the desert, totally hungry for a whole week, with the brooches and costume jewelry. Well, you could have gone in and bought food for a week with this money. Could be walking full and satisfied. Well, of course, without a brooch and costume jewelry. Everything is simple. Sorry guys, attention and time are precisely that which is an equivalent of money in a consumer society, right? Meaning, if we compare both money and attention in this consumer society, if you spend money on various unnecessary things for you, no matter how much you have, it won't be enough for you. Whereas if you spend even a small amount of money, but you spend it wisely, as it is said, on the most necessary things, this will be enough. Invest attention in what you need. If you want love, invest in love. But don't invest in hatred, anger, lack of faith,
Doubts.
bad mood, doubts. All this is what the system likes to sell. And here, look. Well, frankly speaking, I'm simply surprised by how people can create problems for themselves. I understand it when people don't encounter this, when they don't know this, when they live to the dictation of consciousness, well, when they are far from the truth. They can be very pious, but be far from understanding of the world structure, let's say, and actually of what the spiritual world is and what the earthly life is, right? However, when people have already come into contact with the knowledge, when they've already gained experience, they know and understand how the system works. They know what their attention is. And nevertheless, they even have an experience of contact with the spiritual world, meaning when they come into contact with the spirit, with this very Allatra, it fills them, they start feeling one another, they live, they are being filled with happiness. Later on, they get distracted and invest the power of their attention in totally material things. Then, the system stereotypically simply starts sending them negative thoughts about themselves, negative thoughts about someone else, and a person lives with a negative emotion. It's empty inside. He's sad, but he knows that he can somehow get out of this state. It's hard for him to get out of it and even to return to the spiritual, pure and free state. And they say, but what should we do? Guys, well, the power of attention, meaning you have paid for disbelieving yourself. You've paid with the power of your attention, by the way. You have paid for feeling bad. You have paid for that, for those doubts which you have. And you continue paying by doubting what to do. Well, guys, don't you yourselves find this funny? Well, it's true.
This example with the supermarket is very powerful indeed. Regarding what you order,
Well, that's really so.
what you are basically given, that's very powerful precisely for people.
Well, all this is simple, in fact.
These are powerful answers, and also about honesty, that if there is this Holy Spirit in you, then it's a spirit of honesty. Then what can be said?
It's interesting that many people really want. They want to live honestly, they want to live freely, they want God's love. But here, consciousness says, and what about the family, and what about your duty, and what about your job? Yet a simple question, where will it go? Will your family or your job run away from you? The work isn't going anywhere, you'll be working just as you have been. The point is that it immobilizes and distracts you. And the person feels, understands, wants, strives, but has no time. And he,
Or the system.
yes, enters the supermarket of life and buys all kinds of costume jewelry, doesn't he? That's the point.
The system palms off the fear of changes, radical changes.
Fear is the fear that comes precisely from the system. From these imps, they are afraid. Whereas a person who cannot separate himself from consciousness, who hasn't observed it, so to say, the one who hasn't spent the power of his attention on observation of who's talking in him, who wants in him, and who generates these thoughts, which he perceives as his own, that person, of course, gets confused. Why? Because he fulfills, he enjoys, he plays with an illusion. In his consciousness, doesn't he? He fulfills the will precisely of the imp that says, this is you. Everything is simple. Invest attention in happiness, in joy, in love. Invest the inner Allatra in this lotus. Well, it is called in different ways. Invest the power of your attention in God's love, and you will only get God's love. But if you invest it in hatred, you will get hatred. If you invest it in doubts, you will get doubts. You're the one who pays, so you're the one who is given. You pay with your life, in the literal sense of the word. After all, every instant and the power of your attention correlate with the time of your little period, a very little period of time which you exist here. And if you waste both of them, you waste them on being dead. Guys, well, you'll never become alive. And no matter who tells you what, and no matter who prays for you, this is unrealistic. You just won't get where you're going. That's why you shouldn't pay for inevitably dead things. Paying for your own funeral is stupid.
It's a very vivid parallel, the one which you've drawn with the supermarket, because indeed the system acts as a very competent marketer who loads into people's consumer basket and sells to them what they don't need.
And what's new in this marketing? Nothing. After all, again, these are the techniques of the system itself. Doesn't it work this way? Let's look at how consciousness works. And then look how modern supermarkets are arranged. One and the same thing, the same picture in one's head and in a supermarket. Bright attractions, beautiful fairy tales, and a bad product.
In a proper place, right, and the bad product.
Well, isn't that so? But it's expensive.
Well, it's just also interesting that when you ask a person, a housewife or someone else, a question how to enter a supermarket and avoid taking anything unnecessary, they often answer that lists are needed. There should be a clear goal and a clear understanding why you're going there, in order to...
Yeah, doesn't Allatra teach this? That your life should be planned.
Spiritually, yes.
And there should be understanding. If a thought comes into your head, even the brightest one, but you don't need it right now, why would you implement it, abandon what you need? and pay for a fantasy with your attention. And who doesn't do that? What for? To please megalomania? Whose megalomania? Is the same as scratching the dead. Well, this is ridiculous. This is so. People themselves engage in foolishness and then call it life, and later on they resent and say that this is unfair. God, He is actually merciful, and He has to forgive a person after death. He shouldn't send him to torments. He should show mercy to him. God has actually given you life. He has given you time. He has given you attention. He has given you everything. Well, isn't it so? He has given everything.
The bestower,
Right.
the greatest gifts
Yes.
of God and the Holy Spirit are given to a human.
Yes, certainly. There is no one more generous because he gives you the most valuable. You're basically nothing, while a person's consciousness tells him, how come? You're God's child, in fact. No, you're not God's child. So far, you are a vessel that may become someone. And this is the truth of life, and who you will become. If you fill this vessel with death, you'll be dead. If you fill this vessel with life, you'll be alive. And this is also true. However, it's you who should do this. But again, it all recurs. Who dictates to a person and who controls him? If he lives under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, he doesn't sit on a couch and doesn't wait until someone does something, both in the spiritual aspect and, in the transformation of society. And he doesn't separate him from society and society from himself. He doesn't strive to be the head of society in order to live an illusion, a small one, a couple of instants, as if you were worth something in this world. But he strives to be worth something in that world, because no matter what you are worth in this world, this is just an instant. Close your eyes and imagine that you are the king of the whole world. Here's a simple example, all jokes aside. Just don't be lazy. Imagine that you rule the whole world, and then open your eyes. After you have imagined that everyone worships you, bow down before you, and you are the ruler of the entire world. And then open your eyes and look at the reality of what surrounds you, and in what situation you are now, without any illusion. This is a perfect example. Even if you possess that power which all of you have now imagined, it would pass just as quickly and return to that reality, well, not to the one in which you are now, but to a worse one. That's exactly how life flies by, instantly and quickly, and then nothing can be changed anymore. Why? Because a person has chosen that himself. And what does God have to do with this? The fact that he should be merciful? Merciful to what? Nothing will happen to the Holy Spirit, for it's a part of him. He gave it to you to use, so that you can attain and become a part of the spiritual world, but you haven't used it. Right? You have used a part of, pardon me, the dead, and you've become dead. Hence, you have to carry, so to say, that product which you have acquired from the supermarket of life. Well, isn't this honest? In my opinion, it's extremely honest. If you have been given funds to acquire food that will give you life during your transition, but you've bought toys instead, well, eat the toys. They're inedible. And thus who? The one who gave you funds and an opportunity to buy food that will give you life. Is he not good because he gave you not enough funds, or what? Or should he also spend the funds instead of you, run to the store, buy food, come back and feed you? And what kind of attitude do we have towards God under the dictation of consciousness?
The consumer-based format.
A consumer attitude. We come to a temple or in our prayers without even going to the temple because we are lazy. And we start asking for what? We address whole list to God like in a supermarket, right? Just like a good housewife. Do this for me, give me that. Is he your genie or what?
I wish that all people had just one goal in this supermarket of life. The goal to love.
The goal to live and to love.
To live and to love.
And what's the difference? If a person really loves and lives with God's love, not with love for someone else's body, or even not for the body, but rather for domination over him. If he really lives with love for life, love for the spiritual world, then there is life in him. Then he has nothing to be afraid of, because there is no one to be afraid of either. Well, Satan can be afraid, but It's an inseparable part which remains until the last moment of staying here. Well, this passes quickly after all. It's like a disease, a mild one at that, which ends very fast. Therefore, what is the main thing?
To love.
And to be healthy. Right? So, my friends, let's love each other and not be ill. Thank you.